4. By the time he was 6 years old, young Lexington had grown into a most beautiful boy with long golden hair and deep blue eyes the color of cornflowers. He was bright and cheerful, and already he was learning to help his old aunt in all sorts of different ways around the property, collecting the eggs from the chicken house, turning the handle of the butter churn, digging up potatoes in the vegetable garden, and searching for wild herbs on the side of the mountain. Soon Anne Glosspan told herself she would have to start thinking about his education. But she couldn't bear the thought of sending him away to school. She loved him so much now that it would kill her to be parted from him for any length of time. There was, of course, that village school down in the valley, but it was a dreadful-looking place. And if she sent him there, she just knew they would start forcing him to eat meat the very first day he arrived. "You know what, my darling?" she said to him one day when he was sitting on a stool in the kitchen watching her make cheese. "I don't really see why I shouldn't give you your lessons myself." The boy looked up at her with his large blue eyes and gave her a lovely, trusting smile. "That would be nice," he said. "And the very first thing I should do would be to teach you how to cook." "I think I would like that, Aunt Glosspan." "Whether you like it or not, you're going to have to learn sometime," she said. "Vegetarians like us don't have nearly so many foods to choose from as ordinary people, and therefore they must learn to doubly expert with what they have." "Aunt Glosspan," the boy said, "what do ordinary people eat that we don't?" "Animals," she answered, tossing her head in disgust. "You mean live animals?" "No," she said, "dead ones." The boy considered this for a moment. "You mean when they die they eat them instead of burying them?" "They don't wait for them to die, my pet. They kill them." "How do they kill them, Aunt Glosspan?" "They usually slit their throats with a knife." "But what kind of animals?" "Cows and pigs mostly, and sheep." "Cows!" the boy cried. "You mean like Daisy and Snowdrop and Lily?" "Exactly, my dear." "But how do they kill them? Eat them?" Aunt Glosspan. "They cut them up into bits and they cook the bits. They like it best when it's all red and bloody and sticking to the bones. They love to eat lumps of cow's flesh and the blood oozing out of it." "Pigs, too?" "They adore pigs." "Lumps of bloody pig's meat," the boy said. "Imagine that." "What else do they eat, Aunt Glosspan?" "Chickens." "Chickens?" "Millions of them. Feathers and all." "No, dear, not the feathers. Now run along outside and get Aunt Glosspan a bunch of chives, will you, my darling?" Shortly after that, the lessons began. They covered 5 subjects: reading, writing, geography, arithmetic, and cooking. But the latter was by far the most popular with both teacher and pupil. In fact, it very soon became apparent that young Lexington possessed a truly remarkable talent in this direction. He was a born cook. He was dexterous and quick. He could handle his pans like a juggler. He could slice a single potato in 20 paper-thin slivers in less time than it took his aunt to peel it. His palate was exquisitely sensitive, and he could taste a pot of strong onion soup and immediately detect the presence of a single tiny leaf of sage. In so young a boy, all this was a bit bewildering to Aunt Glosspan, and to tell the truth, she didn't quite know what to make of it. But she was proud could be, all the same, and predicted a brilliant future for the child. "What a mercy it is," she said, "that I have such a wonderful little fellow to look after me in my dotage." And a couple of years later, she retired from the kitchen for good, leaving Lexington in sole charge of all household cooking. The boy was now 10 years old, and Aunt Glosspan was near 80. 5. With the kitchen to himself, Lexington straightway began experimenting with dishes of his own invention. The old favorites no longer interested in him. He had a violent urge to create. There were hundreds of fresh ideas in his head. "I will begin," he said, "by devising a chestnut souffle." He made it and served it up for dinner that very night. It was terrific. "You are a genius," Aunt Glosspan cried, leaping up from her chair and kissing him on both cheeks. "You will make history." From then on, hardly a day went by without some new delectable creation being set upon the table. There was Brazil nut soup, hominy cutlets, vegetable ragout, dandelion omelet, cream cheese fritters, stuffed cabbage surprise, stewed foggage, shallots a la bonne femme, beetroot mousse piquant, prunes stroganoff, Dutch rarebit, turnips on horseback, flaming spruce needle tarts, and many, many other beautiful compositions. Never before in her life, Aunt Glosspan declared, had she tasted such food as this, and in the mornings, long before lunch was due, she would go out on the porch and sit there in a rocking chair, speculating about the coming meal, licking her chops, sniffing the aromas that came wafting out from the kitchen window. "What's that you're making in there today, boy?" she would call out. "Try to guess, Aunt Glosspan." "Smells a bit of salsified fritters to me," she would say, sniffing vigorously. Then out he would come, this 10-year-old child, a little grin of triumph on his face, and in his hands a big steaming pot of the most heavenly stew ever made entirely of parsnips and lovage. "You know what you ought to do?" his aunt said to him, gobbling the stew. "You ought to set yourself down this very minute with paper and pencil and write a cookbook." He looked at her across the table, chewing his parsnips slowly. "Why not?" she cried. "I've taught you how to write, and I've taught you how to cook, and now all you got to do is put the two things together. You write a cooking book, my darling, and it'll make you famous the whole world over." "All right," he said, "I will." And that very day, Lexington began writing the first page of that monumental work, which to occupy him for the rest of his life. He called it "Eat Good and Healthy." 6. 7 years later, by the time he was 17, he had recorded over 9,000 different recipes, all of them original, all of them delicious. But now suddenly his labors were interrupted by the tragic death of Aunt Glosspan. She was afflicted by the night by a violent seizure, and Lexington, who had rushed up into her bedroom to see what the noise was about, found her lying on her bed, yelling and cussing and twisting herself in all manner of complicated knots. Indeed, she was a terrible sight to behold, and the agitated youth danced around her in his pajamas, wriggling his hands and wondering what on earth he should do. Finally, in an effort to cool her down, he fetched a bucket of water from the pond in the cow field and tipped it over her head, but this only intensified the paroxysms, and the old lady expired within the hour. "This is really too bad," the boy said, pinching her several times to make sure she was dead. "And how sudden, how quick and sudden! Why, only a few hours ago she seemed to be in the very best of spirits. She even took 3 large helpings of my most recent creation, deviled mushroom burgers, and told me how succulent it was." After weeping bitterly for several minutes, for he loved his aunt very much, he pulled himself together and carried her outside and buried her beside the cow shed. The next day, while tidying up her belongings, she came across an envelope that was addressed to him in Aunt Glosspan's handwriting. He opened it and drew out 2 $50 bills and a letter. "Darling boy," the letter said, "I know that you have never yet been down the mountain since you were 13 days old, but as soon as I die you must put on a pair of shoes and a clean shirt and walk down to the village and find a doctor. Ask the doctor to give you a death certificate to prove that I am dead. Then take the certificate to my lawyer, a man called Mr. Samuel Zuckerman, who lives in New York City and has a copy of my will. Mr. Zuckerman will arrange everything. The cash in this envelope was to pay for the doctor, for the certificate, and to cover the cost of your journey to New York.